What do you get when you mix an out-of-touch, money-hungry company with a franchise encompassing a rogues gallery of iconic characters? You get a catastrophic dumpster fire of movies resulting in the worst connected cinematic universe in modern history.
Ah, the Sony Spider-Man Universe.
Literally the venomized version of the MCU. It's a Spider-Man universe that doesn't have Spider-Man.
Because obviously removing the one character that actually makes these stories compelling is definitely a great idea.
Now let me preface this by saying I absolutely adore Spider-Man. He's a character that's been a constant in my life ever since I was a kid. Whether it was watching the evolution of the Spider-Man trilogies, sorry Andrew, catching up on old comic storylines, swinging around the city in the PS4 game, or the countless other pieces of media Spider-Man found his way into.
It didn't matter. Spider-Man was always around, keeping me entertained and blissfully distracted long enough while Marvel robbed me blind with overpriced merchandise.
I am sadly a slave to capitalism.
But Spider-Man has always endured, and there's a reason for that.
He's everything that a hero is supposed to be and more. He's relatable to everybody. Absolutely anyone in the world can imagine themselves behind the mask.
And what makes him most interesting is that there's nothing special about him.
As cliche as it sounds, his powers aren't what make him so gripping. Gripping. It's what he chooses to do with them. Anybody could have gotten bit by that spider, but Peter Parker knows he was the lucky one who got powers, so he bears that responsibility by using them for good. It's an inspiring story of being a hero even when it's hard. Alright, I need to stop nerding out. You can tell I love Spider-Man.
Along with that, his supporting casts of friends and family members add perfect stakes to the world. They add to the exciting action of Spider-Man's story while also providing interesting and captivating stories with Peter Parker.
He's a character everyone can get behind, but half of his success also has to be given to his rogues gallery of villains. Spider-Man is one of the most star-studded cast of villains ever seen in comics. I would argue it's up there with Batman as one of the most legendary cast of villains ever. Think about it. Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Sandman, Vulture, Mysterio, Venom, Lizard, Electro, Kraven, Carnage, Kingpin, Rhino, Scorpion, Tombstone, Chameleon, Hobgoblin, Shocker, Grizzly, a Big Wheel. Okay, they're not all gonna be winners, okay?
Okay, I'll be honest, even some of the most famous villains are kind of stupid if you actually think about it.
Like, Rhino is literally just a dude wearing a giant rhino costume who loves to run through walls. But hey, it's a testament to Spider-Man because despite the insane cast of characters, he remains the focal point. And somehow, it always still works. We don't talk about this one. Or this one.
The point is, he has a wild world to work with plenty of interesting storylines and character arcs to cover. So that leaves us with one big question.
While absolutely incredible projects like No Way Home and the Spider-Verse movies that completely redefine superhero storytelling, the character of Spider-Man, and provide fan service that both casual and die-hard audiences can get behind are being released, Sony awakens from hell every few years to churn out whatever the hell this is.
I'm sure basically everyone who clicked on this video already knows what the Sony universe is and how catastrophic it is.
Dud after dud has come out, with the only fanfare being the screams of rabid fans mercilessly ripping them to shreds and promptly throwing them in the trash.
And like clockwork, despite Sony's best efforts, I have not heard a single person talk about the new Kraven the Hunter movie that came out a few weeks ago.
And clearly the box office agrees with me. Nobody cares. And it's not like it didn't have star power. Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Russell Crowe, Ariana DeBose, these aren't nobodies.
But still, the numbers don't lie.
Somehow Sony still can't wrap their tiny little brains about what audiences want.
Let me put it in a way they will hopefully understand. Just stick with me. So Kraven the Hunter, right? You follow him? He's a villain, okay? Stick with me. To who, you may ask? Spider-Man. Stop making Spider-Man movies without Spider-Man.
It's really that simple. Fans want Spider-Man.
We don't want whatever the hell this is. The Sony Spider-Man Universe, if you can even call it that, contains 6 movies currently.
3 mediocre at best and completely forgettable at worst Venom movies, the groundbreaking epic Morbius that broke the internet, Madam Web, the most rushed and confusing comic book film ever to be created, which had as much passion behind it as the shit I took earlier. And of course, Kraven the Hunter. What a lineup! Avengers, I think there might be some competition on the horizon.
Oh, and by the way, 3 of those were released this year. Or I guess technically last year now, but you get my point.
3! Either they're just trying to get rid of these shit stains as quick as possible, or they have no idea what they're doing. The Sony Pictures CEO recently told the Los Angeles Times that Kraven the Hunter is, quote, probably the worst launch we had in nearly 8 years he's been at the studio. adding, quote, "I still don't understand because the film is not a bad film."
Why don't you guys like our movies? Come on, stop bullying us. Stop bullying us every time we put out a movie. Why won't this make $1 billion already? Like, what are you doing?
Guys, maybe if you, I don't know, actually, like, made something good, people wouldn't hate it? Is it that hard to understand?
There's not some elaborate hate campaign against Sony. It's just that if you release 6 god-awful movies that absolutely nobody asked for, obviously we're not going to be jumping for joy when you announce an even shittier one later.
It genuinely baffles me how these movies keep getting made. Who is watching these? When is Sony finally going to get the memo that we don't want the bargain bin straight to streaming slot? Kraven the Hunter is the most nothing burger of a movie I have ever witnessed.
Even the memes aren't fun anymore.
At least when Morbius or Madam Web came out, it was kind of fun to like make fun of them and just see how insane Sony had become. Remember when Morbius got so big, Sony thought it was a good idea to re-release it in theaters, and then nobody showed up? Again.
Guys, the writing was on the wall. I don't know what to tell you.
But now this stuff is just becoming sad. They never realized we were laughing at them, not with them. Sony's like that kid in school who would act like a buffoon in class and get convinced to do humiliating things to themselves and wonder why nobody likes them. Compare this lineup to the first 6 movies in the MCU. Sure, they're not all masterpieces, The Incredible Hulk and Thor most notably, but these movies make them look like the fucking Godfather.
What made the MCU work initially was it felt fresh and exciting.
Each movie felt completely unique and different from one another, but were still tied together with teases towards something big in the future that kept audiences coming. They all introduced you to complex and layered characters with fun supporting casts, memorable villains, and interesting worlds for them to explore. It felt new. It was fun. Even when it missed the mark a bit, you still got to see these wild, recognizable comic book characters come to life on the big screen, and that was exciting. And when they eventually teamed up just a few years later, it felt like the world might collapse because of how hyped everybody was. It was the perfect conclusion to years worth of building, and it rewarded audiences for paying attention and following along on the journey. It truly felt like a cultural event. I remember sitting in the theater watching the Avengers having basically no idea what was going on, but I still loved it. And clearly it worked.
But the main reason it worked is that nobody had seen anything like this before.
An interconnected universe unfolding on the big screen where each new standalone movie tied into a larger narrative. It was a cinematic soap opera starring Hollywood's biggest stars as superheroes. It's like this was engineered to be successful. It sounds awesome.
But if you look at recent history, it's starting to feel like the cinematic universe trend has been played out almost to death.
Sure, it's still very successful in a lot of ways. Hell, Deadpool and Wolverine just made $1 billion this past summer, and that movie was all about franchises in the cinematic universe.
But most cinematic universes have either completely imploded, become so convoluted that even comic book fans don't care, or in the case of Sony, were dead from the moment they started.
Fatigue plays a huge part. But soulless cash grabs like this franchise have had a detrimental impact on mine, and I'm sure many others' perception of these universes. Audiences are hardwired to love this stuff.
But you have to bring something new to the table.
There's a reason stuff like The Boys or Invincible have become so popular despite popping up in the prime of superhero fatigue. They brought something new to the conversation. Again, the MCU worked because it was new. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. And it was smart, it was intentional, it had a plan, and it always remembered who it was for, the fans. But Sony, when your supposed Avengers is a questionable sweaty guy with a symbiote, a creepy scientist vampire, a bunch of knockoff spider people, and an evil big game hunter with daddy issues that absolutely nobody cares about, you have to realize you messed up somewhere, right? How can you have a plan for after this? Are these fucking characters gonna meet up at some point? Out of 6 movies, the highest Rotten Tomato score is 58%.
Oh, which by the way is still rotten.
There's nothing interesting here. Sure, on the surface these characters probably sound kind of interesting, and yeah, in the comics they all have extremely cool storylines at some point. I don't actually really know for like Madam Web, but I'll just give them the benefit of the doubt.
But that brings us back to the core of why this universe would never work.
These characters only work because they have Spider-Man. You want to know what makes Kraven the Hunter interesting? Spider-Man. I'm not saying that Kraven isn't a captivating character, but the entire point of his existence is to be an enemy to Spider-Man. So to try to give him a grounded anti-hero origin story film without Spider-Man is already a bad idea.
But that doesn't even cover the fact that nobody cares.
We have all already checked out of this universe, and Jesus, most of us were never even checked in. Writing 6 horribly written stories about Spider-Man characters without Spider-Man, and then getting confused when audiences don't like them has to be one of the funniest jokes jokes ever.
I'm honestly grateful that Spider-Man hasn't shown up in this universe other than that weird shoehorned in deep fake looking cameo with Tom Holland at the end of Venom 2.
Because it makes me shudder thinking about what horrible abomination these asshats would turn Spider-Man into. So some people might say, okay, they just incorporate Andrew Garfield or Tobey Maguire into the universe and then it'll be all good, right?
And to that I say, how dare you reduce either of them to this cesspool of a franchise?
The universe would never work at its core without Spider-Man, but that doesn't change the fact that these are just awful movies.
I'm not going to sit here like some of those other 1 hour long video essayists who I love and explain all the complex strategies Sony should implement to try to fix their universe. Mainly because I'm just not smart enough for that.
I have a much simpler solution. Just stop making shitty movies nobody cares about. Oh my god, it is really that simple. How many times do we have to say it now? We like Spider-Man. Spider-Man, not random characters like El Muerto, a Mexican wrestler with superhuman strength. Yes, that was a real movie they had planned with Bad Bunny attached to star in it. You know, the guy who has appeared in like one movie in which he played a corpse for like 90% of it. I'm just kidding, I like Beltran, but you know what I mean.
Now we're gonna play a little game real quick. I want you to leave in the comments below how many issues you think El Muerto has been in. A character that was going to get a standalone movie before we saw a live action Miles Morales. And don't cheat, I'll know. Think about it, Spider-Man has been a comic character since the 60s. That's 60 years worth of comic book history. Okay, got your guess locked in? Drum roll, please. Two fucking issues.
I know for a fact the Sony execs just wanted to use Bad Bunny in their movie, so they reached into their little bag of obscure Spider-Man characters and pulled out, I guess, what they thought was the best Hispanic character, El Muerto.
And sure, it would have been great to have that representation on the big screen, but we all know that Sony did not have good intentions with this.
It's fine if you want to use a certain actor in your movie, but to create an entire movie based on a character that literally nobody knows purely to cast that actor is insane. I can already hear people arguing, it doesn't matter if he's only appeared in 2 issues, they can just come up with an original story for him. And sure, that's fine. But then why make it about this character? Oh, sorry, I know why. It's so they can slap the Marvel logo on the front and throw in some shitty Spider-Man Easter egg to trick diehard Marvel fans into watching this movie, thinking it'll tie into some larger story in some way. Well, Sony, we're not falling for it anymore. We barely even fell for it the first time.
Venom was easily the best out of the Sony movies, but that's like being the smallest piss stain in a gas station bathroom. You're still a piss stain.
That probably should have been the moment Sony looked in the mirror and realized how insane this all was.
If somehow anyone at Sony is watching this video, please let me be a representative for all comic book fans.
I am begging you to stop making movies. Just stop, please. Just focus on the next Spider-Verse movie. Let Marvel Studios handle the live-action Spider-Man. And fuck, if you're gonna keep making movies, at least give us a new Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movie. I assure you, they would make like $1 billion. I get there's like legal things you gotta get through with that. But still.
Either way, I really hope you take my advice.
Thank you.
And for the love of all things holy, don't you dare touch Big Wheel, I swear to God.